Good morning, friends, and welcome to the United Lodge of Theosophists. We meet every Sunday at 11 a.m. for a discussion of a particular topic presented by a student. And on the first and third Sundays of the month, we have a roundtable discussion of the ocean of Theosophy. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without any attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions of differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the philosophy of Theosophy presented to us at the end of the 19th century by H.P. Blavatsky and William Kwan Judge and others that followed. This lodge and all of the ULTs around the world disseminate the original writings that were given to the world at that time, and the same purpose remains. It is to find who or what we are, what the aim of life is, what is the highest possible for men, and how to achieve that goal. It is stated in the writings that to this end the secret doctrine and the Isis Unveiled was written, and all of the other books that followed. HPB tells us that she turned the key once in Isis Unveiled and again in the secret doctrine. However, to find the gems hidden in those books takes tremendous amount of persistent work, but that work has benefit because it opens and activates all of the centers in the human being that then enables us to get to the core of the writings, which is the meaning underlying the words. So it regards everyone who is involved in this effort and does not pay any attention to the differences among people. No distinction is taken of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it is stated that the true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the Upanishad, and this is the Prashna Upanishad. Day and night is Lord of beings. Day verily is the life, and night is the substance. They waste their life who find love in the outward, but service of the eternal finds love in the hidden. Food also is the Lord of beings. Thence comes this seed, and thence these beings are brought forth, and all that follow this vow of the Lord of beings produce a pair. Theirs verily is that world of the eternal, who have fervor and service of the eternal, and on whom truth is set firm. Theirs is that quiet world of the eternal, but not theirs, in whom are crookedness, untruth, illusion. And so Bhargava Baidarbi asked him, Master, how many are the bright ones that uphold being? Which illumine this? Which of them again is the chiefest? He answered him, Shining ether is that bright one, air and fire and water and earth, voice, mind, sight, hearing. They illumining declare, we uphold this ray, establishing it. And life, the chiefest among them, said, Cherish not this delusion, for I, verily, Dividing myself fivefold, uphold this day, establishing it. They were incredulous. Life proudly made as if to go out above, and as life goes out, all the others go out, and as life returns, all the others return. As the bees all go out after the honeymaker's king when he goes out, and return when he returns, thus did voice, mind, sight, and hearing. Joyful, they sing the praise of life. And now, today's talk, mysteries of afterlife.
Welcome, friends. Today we're going to talk about the mysteries of afterlife, or the post-mortem or antenatal state that we all go through because of reincarnation. We are in a body for a time, but then what happens when we quit the body or before we take up the body? What levels of consciousness, what states of being are a part of our experience. So quickly we have to understand that man is humanity, each man, we are all sevenfold beings, and all those principles relate to a level of consciousness and a state of matter. So we'll list the principles. Quickly. Atma is spirit, and then there's the spiritual soul, the vehicle. Buddhi. Manas is mind, which is dual. Kama are the passions and desires. And this is considered a principle in the East, and more so in the West, but psychology doesn't as such treat it as a principle, and we'll explain why it should be. And then there's the astral body, the life principle, and this is universal, and when it's individualized in the body, we say prana or life, and then the physical body. Down here at the very bottom. So just to give perspective, the Atman, the spirit, the absolute, the indivisible all, it can't really be located in a place because it is in capital all caps, it is. It's not here or there, it forever is. It's eternal, immutable. It permeates everything, all the other principles, so that we can't say that it can be located in any specific place. It's not absent from any specific place. It is it's not really even human, it's universal. At best, we can say that it is a point in metaphysical space from which the human monad and its vehicle man occupy for the period of every life. So its vehicle is Buddhi, the spiritual soul, and together these constitute the monad. It's sort of the synthesis of all principles. We call it the seventh principle. It's the synthesis of all six, and its vehicle is the spiritual soul. We could think of the human monad and its vehicle, man, as occupying a period for a lifetime. And that point is as imaginary as man himself, in reality is an illusion. It's a Maya illusion, the play of the universe. So what we really are always is, but in order to occupy a physical body, there's this gradual descent into matter, and the lowest being the physical, but there's these different levels in between. And they relate to the after-death states or the antenatal states because certain principles are involved. So briefly, the spiritual soul, it's divine, it's the vehicle of the Atman, and in conjunction, these two are impersonal and without attributes. And well, if we include mind, whatever part of mind is assimilated becomes the reincarnating ego. These top three are what go from life to life. So that's sort of what that is. And then we come down to Kama, which is the seat of animal desires or passions. And the astral body is like the double, the plastic soul, the vehicle of the life principle, and then the physical body. And it's important to know these because at the death of the body, when we say, the doctor can pronounce that the body has passed, but if there's still animal heat within the body, it says the brain is being used. And what happens is the being gets sort of sees all the karmic reasons why of that life and sort of reviews the entire life from the moment of birth. They go through a review process. For all intents and purposes, the person is dead to this life, but the real man within is busy in the brain, and not until his work there is ended is the person gone. When this solemn work is over, what happens is the astral body detaches itself from the physical, and the life energy having departed, the remaining 5 principles are in Kamaloka. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a natural separation of the principles, and it's brought about by the death of the body, and it divides the man into 3 parts. First, the physical body, with all its elements, it disintegrates and on the earth plane and is, goes back to the elements from which it came. Second, the Kamarupa, made up of the astral body and the passions and desires, they go to the sort of like the astral plane, Kamaloka, where they go to pieces and start to return to their elements. And third, the real man, the triad, the Atma Buddhi Manas, no longer connected to a physical body and earthly conditions, begins its devachanic journey through this period of sort of like assimilation and sort of like dreamlike, where the highest aspirations of the soul that were not able to be accomplished during life are played out. And this is where the idea of heaven in different religions comes in, because it's like a blissful state, it's idealized. And the Kamaloka, where the passions and desires are slowly returned to their elements, is where like the purgatory or the hell comes, the idea in different religions comes from, because it's we're going to talk about it, it's like a place of desire, but the mind is no longer attached to it, so it's just raw desire, no like conscience guiding it, no thought as to what is right or what should be done. It's just sort of the raw passion, whatever energy and enlivens those atoms, they were impressed by the thinking being. They are not unexpended. They go to the place of Kamaloka where that energy is expended. We're going to talk about Kamaloka. It literally means place of desire, and it's an astral region penetrating and surrounding the earth, and as a place it is on, in, and about the earth. It's called the plane of desire because it relates to the fourth principle, the passions and desires, and its ruling force is desire devoid of intelligence. It's in the astral sphere, intermediate between earthly and heavenly life. The soul may be detained in Kamaloka by the enormous force of some unsatisfied desire, and it cannot get rid of the astral and kamic clothing until that desire is satisfied, either by someone on earth or by the soul itself. But if the person during life was pure-minded and of high aspirations, the separation of the principles is completed more quickly, permitting the higher triad to go into the devachanic state. So depending on our thoughts and life determines our experience after death. So these are generally true for all men, but it depends on each individual. It's going to be a little different depending on the thoughts and the life and how it was lived. And there's, those are each individual, and they vary from person to person. So it's going to be a little bit different. But being purely in the astral sphere, it partakes of the nature of the astral matter, which is sort of earthly and somewhat material. So it's not like high sort of matter that is impressed with the highest. It's the astral plane where all the impressions of the thinking beings on earth are impressed. So and it reflects back to us. So if we feed it with selfish desire, that's what it reflects back. So it's kind of considered a devilish place. So it's an infinitely varied sphere depending on the life that the person lived. But all the hidden desires and passions are let loose in consequence of the absence of the body. And for that reason, it's vastly more diversified than the life plane. It is necessary, and why is it necessary? Because it provides for the natural varieties and differences, but also for those caused by the manner of death. And all these various divisions are but the natural result of the life thoughts and the last thoughts of the person who passed away. While the man is living in the world, the desires and passions he has, they have no separate life apart from the astral and the inner man, but they're sort of diffused throughout his being. But as they coalesce with the astral body after death, it thus forms kind of like an entity with its own term of life, though the soul moves on to devachan, it's sort of like this entity is formed. And because it's composed of the energy and the thoughts of the man when he was in life, we're responsible for its effects, whether it's acting sort of on its own, devoid of mind in this Kamaloka or not. We're still responsible for its effects. because that sort of ball, or I'm just imagining it as like a ball, that bundle of desires and passions can affect the living. So we're responsible in that sense if it does, and how that happens. And it acts without our direct guidance, and thus we are responsible. They form a portion of the skandhas, which are aggregates that make up the man. The body includes one set of skandhas, the astral man another, the kama principle is another set, and then there's two others. There's considered 5 skandhas. In kama, the Kamaloka are the really active and important ones which control rebirth and lead to all the varieties and circumstance upon each rebirth. They are made from day to day under the law that every thought combines instantly with one of the elemental forces of nature, becoming to that extent an entity which will endure in accordance with the strength of the thought as it leaves the brain. And all these are inseparably connected with the being who evolved them, because we are creators. And we need to see ourselves as creators. That even when we're not maybe consciously thinking of stuff or important ideas, even the mind working automatically is activating, impressing elemental lives, and those have their effect throughout on all. There's no way of escaping this. All we can do is have thoughts of good quality, for the highest of the masters themselves are not exempt from this law, but they are constantly giving off beneficent ideation for the good of all. So how is Kamaloka different from the earth plane? By reason that these passions are uncontrolled, unguided, is the reason that it's different. Here, at least the man has conscience and feels responsible to those around, and maybe is able to control them. But in the Kamaloka plane, there isn't that control, and that's why it's dangerous for people to try to contact spirits, quote unquote, because they may not understand what forces they're dealing with. The astral man in Kamaloka is a mere shell devoid of soul and mind, without conscience and unable to act unless vivified by forces outside of itself. It has that which seems like an animal or automatic consciousness, but that's due wholly to the very recent association with the human ego. Every atom that went to make up the man has a memory of its own, which is capable of lasting a certain length of time in proportion to the force that was given to it. So in the case of a very material or gross or selfish person, the force acts longer than in another who was unselfish. And hence, in that case, the automatic consciousness will be more definite on the astral plane. If one could see on that plane, it would be more concrete and more distinct because it's more coalesced. The astral portion contains and carries the record of all that ever passed before the person when living. For one of the qualities of astral substance is to absorb all the scenes and pictures, the impressions and the thoughts, and to keep them and to throw them forth by reflection when conditions permit. So this astral shell cast off by every person at the death of the body could be a menace to those who are still living. The guiding constituents, in man have separated. So it sort of is attracted magnetically from place to place. It wavers, it floats about, has no will of its own. It's governed by attractions in the astral and magnetic fields. So in that sense, this knowledge is requisite, so that if we focus our minds on specific things, that is what we become attracted to, and we set up that habit. If we just let ourselves float around, we're coming in contact with some of these astral entities, and if thought is weak, then they can potentially influence us. But that's only if we allow it, because we're in control of our thoughts. So it gives this sense of responsibility, because we all function under law, the law of karma. So there are these shells, they're called, in the astral plane, and most are not far away from the body, and soon disintegrate. But there are those that persist to a greater degree, and then there's shadowy remains that can hardly be given a place in English to describe them. And then there are definite coherent entities, human souls bereft of the spiritual tie, now tending down to the worst state of all, towards annihilation of the personality. So even within, there's multiple levels, but it just gives us an idea of the range of states of consciousness and matter that takes place after the death of the body. So before the death of the body, the principles are unable to separate. But once the death takes place and the life principle leaves, this is sort of the natural process. But we do have a moral responsibility to what happens afterwards. And now we've approached devachan or devachan. After a certain time in Kamaloka, the being falls into a state of unconsciousness which precedes the change into the next state. It's like birth into a new life, preluded by a term of darkness and heavy sleep, and then it awakes to the joys of devachan. So as the skandhas separate and loosen from the triad, the Atma Buddhi Manas, he begins to think in a manner different from that manner in which we think when we are attached to a body and brain, permitted, in regular daily life. It's where the soul enjoys felicity, is said, where it's like the banquet of the gods. And it literally means the place of the gods. Where in the ancient books it says that lasted for years of infinite number. But really, they're trying to say it lasts for a very long time. It lasts in proportion to the highest aspirations that the person had during life, that they didn't get a chance to experience or live out during the time in the body. So devachan is an interlude between births in the world. The law of karma forces us all to enter the world, being ceaseless in its operation and universal in scope. And it acts also on beings in devachan. It's something like the pressure of the atmosphere, which being continuous and uniform will push out or crush out that which is subjected to it, unless there's a compensating quantity of atmosphere to counteract the pressure. In the present case, the karma of the being and the atmosphere always pressing the being on or out from state to state. The counteracting quantity of atmosphere is the force of the being's own life thoughts and aspirations, which prevent his coming out of devachan until that force is exhausted, but which, being spent, has no more power to hold back rebirth into a body. So why is this state necessary? What is the necessity for this state? One of the reasons it's necessary is for the evolution of the nature of mind and soul. The very nature of manas requires a devachanic state as soon as the body is lost. And it's simply the effect of loosening the bonds placed upon the mind by physical and astral encasement. So just to reiterate, it's an effect state. No new causes are set up in this after-death state of devachan. In life, we can follow through in our aspirations to maybe a fractional extent of, the thought potential put into it, and still less can we exhaust the psychic energies engendered even by each day's aspiration and dreams. But this energy is not lost. Nothing is lost, but it's stored in manas, in mind. It's stored in manas, but the body, brain, and astral body don't permit the full force of the development of the full force. So it is latent, and it bursts forth from the weakened bonds and plunges manas into the expansion, use, and development of that thought force set up in life. The impossibility of escaping this necessary state lies in man's ignorance of his own powers and faculties. From this ignorance, delusion arises, and manas, not being wholly free, is carried by its own force into the thinking of the devachanic state. But while ignorance is the cause for going into this state, the whole sort of purpose of it is remedial, restful, and beneficial. Because it said if the man returned to earth immediately in another body to the same civilization, his soul would be completely tired out and deprived of the needed opportunity for development of the higher part of his nature. In other words, that assimilation helps bring about a birth into a better circumstance, ideally on that evolution that we're tending a little upward each time. So it is said that in devachan there's a vesture which can't really be called a body, but we could sort of call it a vehicle, but it functions entirely on the plane of mind and soul. Everything is as real to the being in devachan as everything here to us feels. It simply now has the opportunity to make its own world for itself, unhampered by physical matter and physical life. Its state may be compared to that of a poet or an artist who, wrapped in ecstasy of composition or arrangement of color, cares not for and knows not of time or objects or anything. So it's sort of an abstract concept, but so if we're making causes every moment, we are making causes every moment, and but two fields exist for the manifestation of those causes. These are objective, like in this world, and subjective, which is both here and after we've left this life. So the devachanic state is that subjective. The objective relates to earth life, the grosser part of man, his bodily acts, his brain thoughts, and sometimes to his astral body. but the subjective has to do with the higher and the spiritual parts, the higher leanings, the aspirations of the soul, and these become the substratum, the support of the being in devachan. So it's not in terms of time as we think of it, because it's subjective. Like if we're lost in a high thought or a meditation, or we're in the zone and we lose track of time, that's like a subjective experience we might be able to relate, where we don't realize time has passed, we don't realize that we missed a meal and that, you know, our body's talking to us that we're hungry or something. It's completely subjective, and it's not, the body doesn't interfere, the brain mind doesn't interfere. So the being in devachan has no direct perception that time has passed. Now, or no concept of tomorrow or yesterday. The soul has all the benefit of what goes on within itself, but it doesn't indulge in speculation about what could happen. It's just like this eternal now, bliss kind of thing. But it remains in that state for a time exactly proportioned to the psychic impulses generated during life. So it's going to be a little bit different for every being, but because it's subjective and these are played out, so to speak, it lasts longer than the ordinary human life, much, much longer. Devachan is sometimes called like a dream, and it lasts until the karma is satisfied in that direction, and there's a gradual exhaustion of the force there. And then sooner or later, tanha, the thirst for life, part of those aggregates, the skandhas, begins to assert itself, and then the being is drawn into earth life again, and the skandhas magnetically sort of attach, lodge in the being, and karma, necessity, brings it back into earth life. It's said that very materialistic thinkers will remain in the devachanic condition stupefied or as if asleep, because they have no force in them appropriate to keep that state of aspiration, living out those highest aspirations for very long. So it passes more like just a sleep, a stupefied sleep state. So that it's like they're torpid, and then they come back to earth again. So this is part of the cycle of reincarnation, and it varies as each individual varies, but these are general rules. Okay. It carries out all that was not possible in life. It expands and weaves these thoughts. The entity has its youth, growth, growing old, and the expansion of the force of good and aspiration has, almost no limit. So devachan serves a very important purpose. It sort of rests the soul. That part of us which could not, flower in earth life becomes, because it is allowed to flower and it's part of the reincarnating ego, it sort of strengthens it. It makes us stronger when we come back. So the magnetic threads which bind the soul to the earth begin to assert their power as this weakens, and the self wakes from the dream, is born swiftly off to a new body, and then just before birth it sees for a moment all the causes that led it to devachan and back to life again, about to begin, knowing it all is just, to be the result of the actions of one's own past lives, and it repines not, but takes up earth life again, and another soul comes back to earth. So I have a couple points, then we'll open it up to questions. So the Kamaloka plane, is it the astral plane? It is. We don't go to any particular locality to reach it any more than we go anywhere when we're dreaming. We simply are in that state. And Kamaloka is like the dreaming state in that it's temporary, and when the energy that caused the dreams, whether good or bad, is used up, the man goes into his own nature as a person. And then one thought about devachan. The question is, then the personal viewpoint is not lost until rebirth? And the answer is that the personality is not dropped off until the ego comes out of devachan. It is only then that the ego resumes its own nature. The end of the devachanic period is the finish and completion of that personality. We usually think of the personality as ending with the brain mind, but this is clarifying it and saying until the end of devachan. That's the end of the personality, because the devachan is a result of that personality's earth life. Okay, we'll open up to questions, thoughts, comments. Being a brief, overview of Dupree's.
The Sevenfold division that you have been on the board, in some other literature, it's referred that the Sevenfold division of man was held back centuries ago because of the dangers that knowledge of the Sevenfold principles would, if someone had nefarious means or reasons for doing things. But looking at the Sevenfold division up there, what possibly, other than the astral plane, could somebody evoke or commit such great troubles? Because normally man, in those days, you said, well, body, mind, and spirit, something like that, right? And other than the astral body, and they're not, if they're negative types, they won't be able to reach the spiritual part of man. So, and then the mind, other than the mind and astral body, what possible
danger could there be?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that came up in here. Let me try to find it. It has to do with the vestures and the ability one could have of projecting a vesture. See if I can find it. It has to do with the astral body, and it's in the ocean. Yeah, go ahead while I look. If you have, if you can think of it, I just want to get it right. I don't want to miss.
I think it's HPB who says that at that time, at the beginning of the decline of the mysteries and the Christian religion being put forward as an anthropomorphic and carnalized Christ, she said there was a tremendous danger because all of the educated classes, they were all educated in Gnostics, and the inner mysteries at that time were known generally to a wide variety of people, and they believed in occultism. She says, just because we are ignorant of those facts, and this does not present any danger at this time, it would back then, because mind control would have been one of those factors.
Okay. Thank you, that makes sense. It also says, HPB says that the spiritual soul buddhi contains a mystery which is never given to anyone with the exception of irrevocably pledged chelas, those at any rate who can be safely trusted. Of course there would be less confusion could it be only be told, but as this is directly concerned with the power of projecting one's double consciously and at will, and as this gift, like the ring of Gyges, might prove very fatal to men at large, and to the possessor of that faculty in particular, it is carefully guarded. Alone the adepts who have been tried and can never be found wanting have the key to the mystery fully divulged to them. Yeah.
This scheme that you presented to us today, it shows the division as we are, but is this present in all of the personalities when they're at the end of life and are going into the devachanic interlude?
Is this present in all of them? I'm not sure I understand the question, but the first thing that comes to the student's mind is no. It varies a little bit from individual to individual, and depending on how the being passed in their life makes a difference as to the strength of the separation and how long it takes place, and the entity in Kamaloka. Like if someone was thrown out of their body by an accident or a sudden death, normally the atoms would not have come apart until the natural term of that life, but because they have, the being is sort of thrown into Kamaloka partially aware, and they may be in that state until, for years, weeks, months, years, until that natural separation would have taken place. And let me repeat, could you repeat your question?
My question refers to these 7 principles. Are they all present in every personality that dies at the end of a lifespan? Because there is a statement she makes, we come across soulless men and women in our daily lives, and perhaps we might want to apply that to it too. What would that mean, for instance, to these principles? If we were soulless, what happened to us? Which is missing? What is missing? What
it
has
would be
separated?
a disconnect between the higher triad and the lower 4, the material. And it means that if they're not being controlled and guided by, the individual, they could be guided and controlled by a stronger mind that might not use them for good, because there are beings who have been selfish life after life after life, and they're in the astral plane, their desire principle is so coherent that they can influence or enter weak or those vehicles that have been separated from their higher principles. And it's not discussed a lot, but it's possible and it's mentioned.
Well, if we don't have the higher triad, that means we don't go into the devachanic interlude, because there isn't any principle that would take us there.
Go.
So there's an immediate return to the earth life again. And in each successive life, it is stated that person becomes evil, more materialistic, more wicked, and totally downward trending. And it is suggested that no one should take a step towards that declivity, I think is the word she uses, which means that it's a downward path, because she says once you take the first one, all of the others automatically follow through attractive magnetism.
It's like Gandhi said, you sink or swim.
Well, this is newly has come to my attention, and it is a danger to us, because if we elbow men who are soulless, do they know they're soulless to start with? And what harm are they really causing humanity is the other end of it.
They may be ignorant of the
But they are very
harm
cunning,
they
she
cause.
says. Cunning becomes very expressed in these individuals.
Yeah, because it's kind of part of desire and lower, mind
Lower
is dual.
mind is there.
Lower mind and
Intellectual.
passions, that cleverness
Yeah.
and cunning,
Mm-hmm.
Devoid of conscience, which
Yep.
is the
The
higher.
higher. Yep. So
Yeah, that would be a very dangerous force, and that's why Kamaloka in general is, in the astral plane, has some potential dangers, and that's why Madame Blavatsky was against, seances and mediumship, because they didn't know what they were dealing with. And there are dangers.
This is going back to the devachan
Mhm.
state. When you surrender the body, what's the process? I mean, is there a delay, like when the body is surrendered, and then do you just jump from one state to the next, or is there like a transition?
You walk over a line.
The reason I'm asking is because I've had experiences, and I'll say one. I had an experience with my pastor. We were very close. He had passed away back in the 90s. And I'm not a very emotional person. And so, everybody wanted to crowd around. How's Kim doing? I'm like, no, I don't do that. No, I need to be by myself. I do a lot of meditation. That's how I get through my issues a lot, especially in situations like that. So I would meditate at night. I wouldn't meditate in the morning, but I would specialize in meditation at night. And so I was already in a mental state of receiving. And I would get up, I don't know, maybe around 11:30, 12. Something would just wake me up, and I would just jump up, and I wouldn't know what to do. I'm up, so now what? So use the bathroom, there's nothing else left to do. And it's like, no, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go downstairs and get a drink of something to drink. I sleep with all the lights out. I turn the light on. It's 11:30, 12 o'clock. I'm very slow, and I turn the light on. I see 4 spirits hovering down at the bottom of the steps. Like they were afraid to come up the steps. They were like walking around like this. Have you ever seen Signs? That movie Signs with Mel Gibson?
I haven't.
Okay. You know that thing, that image is supposed to be of some alien? That's true. If you can imagine, without matter, that's 4 of them just hovering around the steps. And I look, it's like, oh my gosh. I've seen this has happened to me before. So this time it was more interesting. I'm in my 20s, it's like more interesting. And I turned the light out, deliberately turned the light out, and walked away. And I ran back to the switch and turned the light on, and they came right back. And they were like hovering around the steps. And 3 of them took off, and another one was like, so I got to see it just a little longer. This was like a form of a body, but it was nothing. It was like nothing. And I'm like, what is that? What is that related to? What is? I couldn't make anything of it, but I knew for sure that they were beings. They were real. They were there. I didn't just catch them out the corner of my eye. I stood there and watched them, and they were in thought, in some type of, because the way their posture, and they were like looking around, and then they started sneaking away, like tipping away real quick. And so what is that? That's some type of stage. What is that? Is that?
I mean, this student isn't completely versed in, all these states, but it sounds like some sort of astral encounter. I mean, we all have some psychic and senses that more or less give us maybe a glimpse onto the astral plane, but this is infinitely varied, remember. So it could be one of these. Sometimes Mount Blavatsky calls them astral spooks, but the form would probably have come from your own mind, perhaps. She says that during seances, these they would try and contact someone who's passed, and they might see the form, but it was usually part of the medium's own astral body or the astral body of those present. And because the astral body, the astral plane reflects back the thoughts and images, it can, take on a realistic looking form, but it still pertains to this realm, and it's going to be derivative of something in the, that was impressed by a living person, but it's not. To what extent it is going to be helpful or malicious, we don't know. Until our spiritual sight is open, the third eye, and we understand all the levels of consciousness and the beings, it's difficult for us to know what we're dealing with. So she warns about it. But if it is said that right after a person passes, the mind is still sort of reviewing its life, and if there's an especially strong connection between, someone even near or far away, if someone passes and a loved one's on the other side of the world, they might see a sign or a glimpse of that person or feel some strong connection, or so those experiences are real and want to validate, but also to sort of maybe warn that it could be something from the astral plane, and to not try to contact it again or something, but just sort of be aware that there's all kinds of energies and images that can coalesce. Do you want to add to that?
No, I was just comment and then a quick question. The presentation, in the presentation, you mentioned how one would go from physical life to Kamaloka, devachan. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead here, I came across whereby those in Tibet and over there who are adept in a lot of this stuff, they can really alter those states. They can go to devachan first and then Kamaloka. So it's not a fixed progression. And similarly, since the universe is in motion, the astral plane is also in motion. How the physical world, Earth itself, the visible body of the Earth moves, so the astral plane moves also. So it's not just a static place where people think heaven is some place fixed. So that's the comment. But the question becomes, do we see our loved ones again in devachan and friends? And it's also spoken about how a mother can influence child here on Earth. How does that work?
So the first part of the question is, and then we'll end. Lost track of the time. Okay. Do we see our loved ones again? Yes. In that subjective dream, one experiences all the aspirations and loves that were not able to be fulfilled in the earth life, like someone sees their spouse or their mother, their siblings or their children in the idealized state, but it's their subjective dream of it. They're not really interacting with the person, because the devachanic state is very like a high spiritual state, It said adepts can go in and contact, but almost never can a regular person bring someone at that high level down. One has to raise oneself up to that level, and that's not easily done or quickly done. But yes, the power of love between beings from someone in that devachanic state can act beneficently as like a protective influence over someone still on Earth. That is mentioned in the Ocean of Theosophy.
I just want to get some clarification on the 5 skandhas you mentioned. You said there were 5, and could you talk about them? What are they?
I'll briefly look at the glossary, and then that might be a great topic in January. But briefly.
Over there, to your left.
Yeah, the skandhas are an interesting topic because it's like, what are they exactly? I have known, but I forget. It literally means bundles or groups of attributes. Everything finite, inapplicable to the eternal and absolute. There are 5, esoterically 7 attributes in every human living being, which are known as pancha skandhas. They are form, physical body, perception. You know how sometimes it says that we're attached to name and form, nama rupa. This is what we're part of what that means. Form, perception, consciousness, action, and knowledge. And I'll read what else it says. These unite at the birth of man and constitute his personality. After the maturity of these skandhas, they begin to separate and weaken, and this is followed by decrepitude and death. So that would be a great topic in January to explore a little more.
You do it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it piqued my interest. I'm happy to do it. But these they meet the incoming ego, they attach and at birth help determine the birth, because nothing is ever lost, it's only transformed, and until the energy that was put into those is worked out, they will persist and transform. So through meditation, through becoming a disciple, one would learn to become detached from these skandhas and understand what they are, and therefore they would no longer influence one. The Mahatmas are no longer under the illusion of form. They understand that we see a difference between the perceiver, the perception, the act of perceiving. They would understand all the levels of consciousness, karma, and wisdom. So
One more question.
Oh, okay.
Short question. When adepts come to our planet to lead the consciousness of humanity, do they go through Kamaloka and devachan as well, or they can choose when they come? And this is a question.
Yeah, it's not necessary for them to go through these stages, because they're perfectly attuned, all their vestures, they're in complete knowledge of all these states, and in perfect control of all their vestures. it's not necessary for them to go through. Some choose to come into this plane through birth, through parents and so forth. But there is a particular kind called an avatar, which is like a direct descent, and they may coalesce, create a form. But no, it's not necessary for them to go through these states. These are a result of the being, the thoughts and actions of the being in life.
And one more question as well. I read in Mahatma's letters by Sinners that when students asked about HPD, why she's so irritated, one of the masters said that because the seventh level, Atma, they took them to and left in Shambhala in order she didn't give all the secrets she knows because humanity is not ready yet for that. This was the explanation of her temper.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's probably answer to Jai question, can the soul, the person live without all the 7 levels? And she wanted to say that some people don't have soul, but when this higher being came, like Bodhisattva or HPD, she didn't have the 7th level because she had it, but it stayed in Shambhala, as I understood from this letters, because she needed to keep some secrets from us.
This student isn't familiar with that work, but as said, the Atman is not absent from any point in physical or subjective space. It ever is. It's never missing. But the adepts, because they are in perfect control of their vestures, can weave themselves a body out of more rarefied astral material, the highest levels. So yes, the student would suggest that it may be possible for a being to all these principles are present, but they might be grouped differently depending on their level of consciousness.
Yes,
Final?
I have also come across that, what was just stated by Marina, and that is in the Mahatma letters, where I don't know exactly right now as I speak what it was, but there's some, it could be not, if not the whole principle, because each principle is divided into 7. So it could be, there was something left back for her own protection, and it does, as she states, it explains why her behavior to those on the outside were as it was, but she was in perfect control of everything that she did. But still, there was, because of certain environment or situations that could have occurred, there was that possibility of something occurring, and for her own protection, they did leave something was left back in the lodge, the Great Lodge.
I guess it'll have to remain a mystery to us at this point. Something to think about, but we'll just end with perhaps. Thanks.
Yeah, what were you talking about? I have